Josh, how you doing? You all right?
Thank you, Guy.
Good, good. Well, thank you very much for putting some time aside to sit down with me today and host this tasting that we're going to do on Chapel Down. I'm really quite excited because I'm a big fan of your wines for a while. Great through the website, and obviously to have the winemaker go through them is a real treat for us all. To start things off, just give me a quick rundown on your career, and then we'll start tasting some wines.
Thanks. Well, yeah, I mean, thanks for having me. My career has mainly been at Chapel Down, which is a pleasure. I always wanted to work in England, and so there are a number of people that I want, that are great, and Chapel Down is one of them. So I'm very happy to be here. I studied at Plumpton College, worked briefly in South Africa, briefly in Alsace, and did another stage in Champagne, all with the idea of coming back to England, really, because
Okay.
specifically, Alsace and Champagne, for me, the most important styles of wine in England are aromatic dry white wine and traditional method sparkling. And for me, the two kind of iconic regions for those styles of wine in the world are Alsace and Champagne, so that's why I went there. But applied, wanted to come back to England, and preferably Kent. So I was born in Canterbury. It's a really exciting place to work, isn't it? So to come back and to be part of where we are now in the county of your birth it's a real pleasure.
I think timing did well as well if you're able to come back and really capitalize on what's happening here in the English wine industry.
Yeah, I feel very lucky, feel very fortunate because you know, wine regions, I sound a bit trite, but wine regions aren't born very often, are they? And they're only born once. Yeah, so it happened in New Zealand, what, 50, 60, 70 years ago, happened in Champagne a few hundred years ago. But it only happens once, and it's happening here, and it's happening now. So I feel very fortunate to find myself in the midst of it, really. It's great.
And I suppose also with one of the largest producers as well, you've got lots to play with.
Yeah, certainly there are definitely opportunities with being one of the larger producers. There are advantages and disadvantages to all the different scales of all the producers, but yeah, we have access to a lot of different parcels of grapes and different varieties, and quite an open philosophy to how to make wine. So that's a nice position to be in, yeah.
I bet as a winemaker, you want freedom. You want to be able to explore and experiment.
Yeah, you do. And the directors here are very supportive, but equally they're not winemakers. So they're not looking over my shoulder and telling me what to do and what not to do, which is nice. As you say, you do want kind of you do want freedom.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think let's crack on, Josh. Let's go through some of your wonderful wines. Where do you want to start?
Great. Well, let's start with Brut non-vintage. Oh, let's just fade that. Brut non-vintage.
Sure.
This is the most important wine for us, and one of in terms of volume, certainly one of the most important wines, one of the most important English wines at the moment. It's a wine that we've been making for a number of years. So I've been with Chapel Down for how long? Oh, yeah, 11 years, just 11 years. I started January 2010.
Okay.
And this is a wine that we've been making for longer than that. But obviously we've been making it for all the time I've been here. And the style has changed. And the style has changed for the better. And that's something that I'm really proud of.
So what do you mean by the style has changed? Have you focused, well, tell me.
So when I started, the Brut that we were selling still had Reichensteiner in it. Not non-traditional. That changed from the 2010 vintage, and since then it's always been a combination of Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, and Pinot Blanc as well. We've always had Pinot Blanc in there as well.
Okay.
So that's the kind of that's pretty basic. The grape varieties have changed slightly. What else has changed? Then the biggest influence is going to be the fact that the vineyards have changed. The vineyards that we grow on now are better than they were. We're learning more about our terroir every year. Every vintage that passes, we learn more, and we use those learnings to inform future planting decisions. And we've planted quite a bit recently. So, you know, we'll come on and we'll talk about Viticultural in a minute as a single vineyard. That's the vineyard that you can kind of see behind me. Not literally, but, you know, the image is behind me. And that was a really important vineyard for us to plant in 2007. Actually, sorry, 2008. But we planted a lot more near there since then. We've started working with new growers, such as Yates Court. And that means that the quality of the fruit that's coming into the winery now has never been better. So we're using better varieties, you know, more traditional varieties for this style of wine. And we're sourcing those grapes from better vineyards. Those are the two big differences, because, you know, once you get your vineyards right, you know, everything else can follow. But if you don't get the fruit right from the vineyards, then, you know, you'll be chasing your tail. So what else has changed? Kind of acid management has changed slightly. So prior to myself being winemaker, so I took over as winemaker in 2013. And Andrew Parley, who's a Kiwi guy, was winemaker from 2010 to 2013. And prior to him was Owen Elias. And Owen's style, at the time when he was here, may still be partly there, is more non-mallow. Whereas Andy and I started at about the same time, and we preferred a bit more, you know, a bit more use of malolactic fermentation. So over time, yeah, grape varieties have changed, fruit's got better, more kind of richness of fruit, but then slightly in the winemaking has changed as well. So there's more use of mallow, not 100% in all the years, but more use of mallow. That's brought the acids down, which has allowed us to bring the dosage down, and show the kind of ripeness of the fruit flavors that we're getting from the vineyards. And then, you know, there are other tweaks as well, which we can talk about in a bit: glass, color, cork type, you know, whatever. Kind of gets a bit geeky then.
I think that doing the malolactic is important to adding you know, it's extra mouthfeel, a bit more texture and body to your sparkling wine. Is that part of the reason for doing it?
It can add those things. It's, for me, it changes the texture and the mouthfeel. Yeah. Without necessarily adding, because what the most important thing it does is it reduces the amount of acid. Yes, it changes your acid profile as well, obviously malic to lactic, but it reduces your acid. So, you know, if you have a particularly cool year with particularly high, you know, slightly higher acids, and you don't do mallow, then you may end up with a wine, you know, 10 plus grams per litre, which acid as tartaric, which can be interesting, but also it can require more dosage. It can be a bit more challenging. Sure. You can find balance at various different points. And, you know, there are lots of things within that wine matrix. It's not just about acid or type of acid and sugar, you know, time on lees, concentration. There's a lot more than just those two things. But yeah, acid management is really important for us, really important.
I think, as you say, I mean, due to a cooler climate and everything that you're mentioning, it is an important factor within the English wine industry. Main thing that's jumping out to me about this sparkling wine is I'd love to try it at different food groups. I think it's got a wonderful edge to it that will balance out some slightly richer dishes. And I think that's key, finding food pairings and groups for particularly English sparkling wines, because I think you can get a wonderful balance there between them all. Have you come across many good pairings?
Well, particularly since lockdown, because I don't want to date this video, but we are in lockdown. Particularly since lockdown, me and my wife and my children have enjoyed fish and chips most Fridays, or some kind of takeaway. You've got to kind of punctuate the week, and so we have fish and chips, and we often open a bottle of sparkling wine with that, and that works well. Equally works really well with sushi. I quite like it with sushi. Yeah, I mean, it's for me, it's all about fresh fish with these kinds of wines. We live in Rye in East Sussex, and so it's famed for scallops, but also, you know, I like to go up to Whitstable on the North Kent coast, and lots of oysters up there. For me, that's where these wines really sing.
And how has it been received?
The wine's received well. You know, I mean, as I said, this is one of the most, certainly in volume terms, one of the most important English wines that are out there at the moment. I think the fact that it's getting better is slowly being recognised, and that's nice. You know, um, we're making, you know, now we've got the vineyards right. We're making these small kind of adjustments to try to finesse the style, and we will continue to do that. You know, every year you've got to try and make it better, haven't you? Otherwise, what's the point? Why do what you do if you're not striving to do better every year? And I think you know, without blowing my own trumpet, it's a big team effort. I think every year it is getting better, and so you know, we're really pleased, and our customers seem to be too. I mean, you know, if you're watching this video and you're drinking this at home, then let me know what you think. But let's talk a little bit about the wine if you want. This is Chardonnay dominant, 48% Chardonnay, 42% Pinot Noir, and then 5% Pinot Meunier, 5% Pinot Blanc. This is sourced, majority of the fruit, vast majority of the fruit is sourced from Kent, as is all of our fruit, with a small amount from Essex and East Sussex. The majority of it is from our own vineyards. We used to buy a lot of fruit in from other vineyards. That percentage is decreasing largely because we're planting so many of our own new vineyards. So we're probably, you know, where we used to grow about a third of our fruit, we're probably now growing 2/3, and that is, you know, kind of increasing, which is nice. You know, you have I'm not saying anything about any of our growers. Some of them, you know, we've worked with for decades. You know, we've worked with some of our growers for 3 or more decades, and we have very good relationships with them. And some of our new growers are fantastic as well. But it is nice, you know, having more control of your own vineyards. You're more able and more willing to take certain risks and to try new things. So that's a great thing.
Yeah, especially if you're expanding, and as you say, you have the opportunity to then experiment a little bit more, and you've got more grapes coming in every year. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. What else about this wine? So it's a non-vintage wine, but it's based on the 2018 harvest.
Okay.
We do use reserve wines, not possibly as much as I'd like at the moment, but again, that's part of those things. You know, every year we're trying to use more and more and trying to get better at these things.
Yeah, cool.
But the richness of the 2018 harvest shows through. So I don't know if you remember 2018. It was a long, hot summer. It was you know, it was one of those kind of milestone years for English wine, really. The quality was excellent, the quantity was good, disease pressure was low, everything, you know, the stars aligned that year. And it shows in this wine.
Well,
so it was bottled in June 2019. I don't know, without looking at your bottle, I couldn't tell you exactly when yours was disgorged, but we tend to keep this wine on average for 18 months on lees.
Okay.
Before disgorging. And then disgorged and dosed with 8.5 grams of sugar. So all of our dosages are relatively low. They kind of range from 6 to 9, whereas I guess 10 years ago they were probably ranging from 9 to 12.
Okay.
So that's kind of the order of magnitude to which they've reduced. 8.6 grams acid, which is nice. It's slightly higher than previous years because so 2018 was a really warm year. We were seeing the acids coming down fairly quickly at harvest, and so we kept a proportion of this wine non-mallow, and that's why the acid's 8.6. Whereas normally we'd probably be looking at around 7.5 for this style of wine.
Okay,
so it's a bit higher, but actually I like that freshness. I need to keep that freshness, and in a warm year, you don't want to lose your freshness. If you lose freshness in England, then you're doing something wrong, in my opinion.
Yes, no, I was just about to say it is important to have that freshness because you need the clarity for the wine to show. And a lot of that is about the freshness. You need the context within the balance itself. I completely agree.
Yeah, so I'm really pleased with that balance. It's fresh, you know, it's very dry, crisp, lots and lots of apple fruit, which is, you know, it's what I like. I love Chardonnay. And that is quite dominant here. There is some red fruit. The Pinot Blanc gives a slight floral touch, not kind of honeyed, but it can go that way with age.
Okay.
It's just kind of slightly jasmine-y, which I quite like. I like, you know, Pinot Blanc grows well in the UK. And I think it adds a nice dimension, particularly to a wine like this. You know, this is a relatively young style of wine. You know, it's 2018. It's 18 months on lees. It's, you know, comparable with a non-vintage champagne. And to have something, you know, quite aromatic and quite fruit forward is yeah, I think that's a really appealing style of sparkling wine for me.
Absolutely, and as we're saying, it's a very good point to start Chapel Down with. This is how you will introduce people to your wines, and also to start our tasting today.
Yeah. What else to know? Just one more note on this. So this kind of keeps disappearing into the back, doesn't it? This, as I said, was based on the 2018 harvest, and that was the first bottling of this wine where we went into ebony glass. So that's very, very dark brown glass to eliminate the possibility of light striking our wines. So that you'll see that in our sparkling wines already with our Brut and our Rosé Brut, and you'll see it come through with the other sparkling wines in time.
Sure. I mean, it's that extra bit of attention to detail, isn't it? You say light strike is a problem, and if you're able to help that or rather inhibit it as much as possible, then it will add to a better wine. For, I presume it's also for the longevity of the wine. It will help it last a bit longer.
Not necessarily. Well, it depends how it's being stored. It's really it's about consistency. What we don't want, you know, we've spent lots and lots of time in the vineyard, lots and lots of time in the winery creating something that we're very proud of. And, you know, we can't tell every single person in every single shop who buys this wine, please don't put it on your windowsill, just put it in a dark place. You know, you just can't do that.
No,
so it's much easier for consistency just to remove the possibility of that, put it in a very dark glass bottle. Because green is fine, but it's still not as good as they call it ebony. It's very dark brown, basically.
Sure.
Clear is really bad. Green is still not that great, but this really does make a difference. It's all about those small tweaks, you know, small adjustments, trying to do it a little bit better every year, and those small adjustments hopefully will add up to a greater whole.
Well, yeah, and you're refining your style, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a small investment going into a dark glass bottle. So it's a real commitment to quality from the directors. When we're selling over 1 million bottles a year now. So if you increase your cost of your bottle, even by relatively small numbers, it can add up to quite a large number at the end of it.
Shall we move on to the next wine?
Let's.
Okay.
So. Let's try another sparkling. We're going to go for the Kitts County Blanc de Blanc.
It's a good seller, this wine.
Sorry?
It sells well, the Blanc de Blanc, this one.
Good. So this is 2015 vintage. Now, 2015 was quite a cool spring, quite a delayed bud burst. And that, I mean, it can be good because, you know that you're dodging, you know that you're not going to hit any frost if you've got, the vines are delayed in bursting. But equally what it can do is it can compress the vintage slightly. You've got fewer days then to get to flowering and then veraison and then ripening. It was a relatively dry year, relatively sunny, but not overly warm. And disease pressure was very low. The fruit was picked, most of it in October because it was just that slightly later year. We didn't have that big heat spike at the end like we did, in 2018 or 2014 or 2011. But at the time, I felt that I was going to be underwhelmed by the wines, but actually over time, they've really opened up and they've really shown to be what can be a really good English sparkling wine vintage. This is what I mean when I say, every year we're learning a bit more about our terroir, our whatever you want to call it, our vintage conditions. Sure. We wouldn't know that those kind of climatic conditions would lend wines that would then blossom several years down the line, but they have. And I'm not just talking about our wines, that, you know, obviously we taste a lot of English sparkling wines, and a lot of the 2015 vintages were really nice, you know, really kind of pure flavours, yeah, that I think have shown well. Should talk about the Kitts County vineyard here, because this is a single vineyard wine. We make wine from our own vineyards, as I've said, and we also have partner growers who grow fruit for us. This is one of our own vineyards, and it's pictured in this image behind me. As I said, it's Kitts County. It's just near, nearest kind of town is Maidstone, and it's on the, for those of you who don't know Kent or the geology of Kent well, as you drive towards Dover from London and you're going along the M20, you've got a kind of a ridge of chalk to your left, and they are the North Downs. And on those North Downs, there are some fantastic vineyard sites. We planted Kitts County back, as I said, 2007, 2008. And we didn't plant it with an idea that we're going to make a single vineyard wine or even, you know, as it is now, a single vineyard range. We planted it because it's a great site. The first fruit came into the winery, and, you know, looked good. Analysis looked good. There was a very small crop in 2010, and then, you know, post fermentation, we taste all the wines blind, obviously, and taste them as far as we can by vineyard, and then separated by variety or clone or block, or however you want to kind of separate out the vineyard and the pressing. But what was clear from that vintage onwards, and then 11 and 12 and 13, was that the Kitts County wines were always coming out on top.
Okay.
You taste them all blind across all the vineyards, and the Kitts County wines were always coming out on top, which is reassuring when you've quite literally ploughed loads of money into a field. It's nice to see that, you know, you made the right choice, really. I can't take any credit. But, you know, it's nice to know, because you know that you're going to be working with that fruit for years to come. So that's a really nice feeling. Yes,
yeah,
we've got something here. And then we thought, okay, well, this is good. This is a good site, and looks like it's our best site. So how do we then make it better? Because that's the goal, isn't it? That's why we're doing this, because we don't know how good English wine can be, and we're in a nice position where we can find out. So we take our best vineyard, and we then do lots of analysis on the grapes as they come off. So when we planted the vineyard, we planted 23 different clone and rootstock combinations. And then we do all the analysis on that, not only just those blocks, but then within the block as well. So the top of the field and the bottom of the field, things like that, just to try to really map out where the best parts are. And then we could start to isolate, okay, that's a really nice site for sparkling Chardonnay, for example. So we did that. And then we launched the first single vineyard wine from 2013.
Okay.
And it's been well received. You know, it's done quite well in competitions. And, you know, the most important thing is the taste. And I'm pleased with it. It's got that real, kind of purity, that linearity that comes straight through the palate, which for me is what really nice Blanc de Blanc is about. Not in a searing high acid kind of way. This is 7.5 grams acid. It's in a like a precision. Really good wines, and I'm not saying this is, you know, one of the top wines in the world. That's not my style, but like really good sparkling wines, what we aim for with really good sparkling wines is, and it doesn't happen very often, when you get that balance between precision, purity, linearity, call it whatever you want. It all gets a bit pretentious, doesn't it? When you get that kind of focus and purity, and when you can balance that with weight, texture, intensity, that's when something really special happens for me. And so, you know, with this wine, for example, you know, you're getting the best fruit from our best vineyard. It's a nice, gentle, south-facing chalk slopes between 50 and 80 meters, 30 and 80 meters above sea level. You know, it's really nice fruit, and you're getting the richness and the ripeness from that. You're getting the precision and the purity from that, but also from the way that we press the grapes, from the way that we extract the juice. 15% of it's fermented in barrel as well. So that, again, adds just a bit more kind of complexity and weight. This would have been bottled in June 2016, okay, and then disgorged in 2020. So 4 years on lees. Again, it's that bit more time to develop those, you know, the richer, more kind of toasty notes that you're seeing in there.
Absolutely. What I picked up,
it's complexity and kind of layers of flavour at that point, and that's where, yeah, that balance, as I was talking about, where you've got the purity and the poise, but also the generosity and the power.
No, I completely agree. The main thing I picked up from it straight away was the balance, but there's a lot going on there. There is the complexity. There's lots of different flavors, a very good mouthfeel. The main thing I like about this one is that it's the precision of it. It's very precise in terms of. I think sometimes some sparkling wines can get a little wishy-washy. Forgive me for putting it like that, but this doesn't. It's very focused. You know, there's an intention to it, and everything you're saying is a description of that and what you've put in, and the wine displays it. It's a lovely wine, and what a find to have a single vineyard.
Yeah, I'm really pleased with it. And I look at all of these wines. I look at all the wines we make, and I'm really proud of them, their price point as well, because you know, the brut non-vintage, it represents really good value for money when you look at it again, you know, up against you know, non-vintage champagnes. And similarly, this is a vintage Blanc de Blanc that I would happily put in a competition against you know, the great wines made in Champagne, and at the price, it looks smart.
That not only looks smart, tastes smart, stands up, as you're saying. So you'd definitely be able to pair it off against some of the finer sparkling wines and champagne.
Yeah. So the only other thing to note, dosage on that is 8 grams per litre.
Okay.
One other thing I guess we'll just briefly touch on while we're here, because it's nice to talk about things that we're doing to try and increase the quality. We only use the cuvee for our sparkling wines, which is something that we like to do. We do make still wines as well. We'll talk about that another time, hopefully. But we use the cuvee, only the best juice for our sparkling wines, and the harder pressed juice we use in our still wines. So that not only gives us another wine to offer the customers, but safeguards and maintains the quality of our sparkling wines. That's one thing. We moved to using these little fellas. I don't know if you can see that, the Diane technical cork a few years back, and that's been a real step forward as well in terms of consistency. So these are technical corks. So the cork is all chopped up, treated with supercritical CO2 to remove any TCA, so any potential cork taint, and then put back together. So you've got no TCA, that's great, but also there's a homogeneity of oxygen. So oxygen transfer both from the cork and then through the cork as well. So what we're looking for is consistency. You know, there's no point spending all the time, money, energy, passion, effort that we do in the vineyard and the winery if we're then let down by a closure. So what we're looking for is consistency. Once the bottle, once the cork is in the bottle, once it leaves us, we know how that's going to develop. That's really important for us. So yeah, moving to dark glass, using the Mythic, installing jetting technology as well. So we've done that recently. Which is where on the disgorging line, just before the cork goes in, a small droplet of sulfured water, it's 100 microliters, so 0.1 of a mil, gets injected into the top of the bottle. This causes the foam to rise in you can see the neck here, in the neck of the bottle just before the cork goes in. And because the foam is made of CO2, and CO2, carbon dioxide, is heavier than air, it will eliminate the air, eliminate the oxygen, and homogenize the amount of oxygen left in that headspace. Because one problem when you don't have jetting is that you can get bottle variation. And every year we're just trying to do things a little bit better.
That is very precise. And as you say, you've got to maintain the quality as much as possible, particularly how much wine can change, and with all these little air gaps, should we say, or the oxidation, it's very important, which you're clearly taking to light. So great.
Yeah.
Moving on to the next one.
Yes, let's. The next one I'd like to show you is the Rosé Brut.
Thank you.
So again, you'll note that this is in a dark amber bottle to reduce light strike. This was one of the ones we used to put this in a clear bottle, and that's what I thought we'd move away from. I thought, oh well, you know, we'll end up moving the rosé from a clear bottle to a green bottle, and all will be well. But then it turned out the green glass didn't perform that well either. So then we moved everything to dark. But that's that's what happens when you do experiments, isn't it? You find a information for yourself. So this is a non-vintage product, but it is based on 2018. Just to be clear.
Incredibly aromatic. Like, wow.
Yeah.
Really.
So for me, I love this wine. I love Chardonnay, but this wine is just so like just bang full of red fruits, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what it's about.
Go on.
Strawberries and cream. That's kind of the brief, and not in an overly sweetened rosé Californian Zinfandel kind of way. It's like it's got to be fresh and crisp, but there's fresh red berries, fresh yes, just like fresh strawberries in summer. Yeah, it's just lovely.
What about how would you pair this, do you think? It's more fun with rosé.
Yeah, you can. I mean, again, it's quite dry, which for me suits the style. So there's a bit more acid on this one because again, there's only a partial mallow on this, so we've kept quite a bit more malic acid to keep that green freshness.
Yeah, a bit of edge as well.
Relatively low dosage, 8 grams per litre. But it's lots of red fruit. How would I pair it? I mean, it's got that bit more texture, hasn't it? So instead of going, where the first couple of wines maybe you go, just like a seafood platter, this I think could take a bit more.
Absolutely.
So grilled salmon, asparagus. I mean, it's just taking me to summer, really. I'm thinking about asparagus, and it's, again, I don't want to date the video, but it's January. I'll be thinking about asparagus and new potatoes and hollandaise sauce and grilled salmon, but that's where it takes me. Or you've got to be careful with the dressing and vinaigrette, but kind of a niçoise would be lovely with a tuna steak. That would be really nice.
Yeah, I was thinking fish because it's still got a nice edge to it, nice bite, but then you've got the softness, and when the red fruits are coming through, it's just very, very delicious. It's great wine.
So let's talk a little bit about the wine. Kind of go into it a little bit if you want. It's Pinot Noir. It's listed as 100% Pinot Noir, but that is a bit of a lie because it's got some early Pinot Noir in there. So in case the viewers don't know, you can call a wine 100% of one variety if at least 85% of that variety is present in the wine. This is actually about 96-97% Pinot Noir. But the reason it's got early Pinot Noir in there is about colour. So the way that we used to make rosé, sparkling wine, and the way that the majority of rosé and champagne is made is that you make a base wine with Pinot Noir or Chardonnay, and when you do that, you're hand harvesting your grapes, you're pressing them whole bunch, doing everything you can to minimize skin damage because you don't want tannin coming out of the skins and into your wine. You're trying to make something that's light and delicate because any bitterness or astringency that you might get from those tannin is only going to be accentuated by the presence of bubbles after secondary fermentation.
Sure.
So everything we do when we make sparkling wine is to handle those grapes really delicately. But the way that the majority of rosé sparkling wines are made in Champagne is that you make your base wine, you then make a red wine from Pinot Noir, and then blend it in to get your rosé colour. And the way that you make red wine, in case you don't know, is that you take your You take your grapes and you're doing the opposite of being gentle with them. You put them through a destemmer and a crusher, and then you pump it over or you punch it down a few times a day because you want to extract the color from the skins. And what else is in the skins? Well, there's tannin. You know, when you make a red wine, you extract tannin. That's kind of the point. And it just always jarred with me because those two things are like opposite ends of the spectrum for me. And I know there are good ways of making red wine for sparkling wine. I get that and I appreciate that. And people who do it, good on you. I'm not meaning to talk you down. It's just not the way I wanted to do it. So, because we were finding in a cool climate, when you make a red wine in a cool climate, you end up with a very light color.
Yeah. And
so you end up having to add quite a lot of Pinot Noir to your base wine in order to achieve your color. You know, you might be adding, we ended up adding 10% in some years. I've heard, 15, 20% in champagne in some years. So, and that to me, just didn't quite sit right. I want something that's fresh, light, delicate. I want to, with this wine, I want to take the weight out of the wine.
Sure.
Because if you take the weight out, then it should be effortless. Rosé sparkling wine for me should be effortless. And so what we did was we started playing around with early Pinot Noir, which used to be thought of as just like a mutation of Pinot Noir, but then subsequently was found to be a separate cultivar altogether. And when you grow it, obviously, from the name, it ripens earlier. It has smaller berries. And if you think about and it has a darker color. So if you think about the small berries for a start, when you make a red wine and you're crushing and destemming your grapes, if you have small berries, then you have a greater skin to juice ratio. There's not as much juice inside each berry. If you have big berries, there's lots of juice and only it's all about that ratio. So with early Pinot Noir, you end up with a higher skin to juice ratio and also a much deeper color. The wines of early Pinot Noir will give you a much deeper color than Pinot Noir picked at the same ripeness in the UK. So we started playing around with making red wines like that and blending that back and found that it worked quite nicely. So not only was the color more intense and deeper, but also it was more stable over time. Okay. And it's got a nicer hue for me as well. It's kind of less down the salmon end and slightly prettier, if I want to use that word. But the key thing is we use much less of it. So instead of using, 10% plus, we're using 3 or 4%. And by not adding all that tannin in the wine, as I say, what we're doing is we're taking the weight out of the wine. And if you can take the weight out, then you don't have to add more sugar to kind of try and offset any astringency or bitterness you might have got from that red wine. And that's when, for me, the ripeness of the fruit comes through and the lightness, and that's the end result.
Yeah, as you say, I mean, it's about balance, and that's something you've spoken a lot about, is how everything interplays with each other, and then the result is the wine at the end. What does this wine say about itself?
So for me, that like when I think about what I want from a rosé sparkling wine and what our English climate can do well, because it's not about me, it's what we grow. Then for me, it's got to be loads of red fruit, light, delicate, effortless, and that pretty much hits the brief for me.
Absolutely.
So again, not too much time on these, because I don't want those light, delicate flavors to be kind of confused by the richness that you can get from autolysis. There are some great rosés out there that are aged for years on these, and fair play, but that's not the style I want to make here. And so this is aged to the same kind of regime as the Brut vintage. Okay. About 18 months on these.
Great. And that's adding a lot of extra texture and dimension to the wine, I presume.
It kind of starts to come together. You get texture, particularly on the mid-palate at that stage. And you do need that. You don't want it to be all light and effortless. It's got to have some, it's got to have something to it. Particularly when it comes to pairing it with food, that can help.